Gray shivered as he walked down the snow-covered streets of New York City. His clothes were ragged, and he had no gloves or scarf to protect him from the biting cold. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him of his hunger. He saw the warm glow of the fancy restaurants lining the streets, and he couldn't help but feel a twinge of jealousy. He had once dined in those restaurants, savoring the finest meals and the most expensive wines. But now, he was reduced to begging for scraps. Gray took a deep breath and approached the entrance of one of the restaurants. He hoped that someone would show him some kindness and offer him a warm meal. But the staff ignored him, turning their backs on him as if he was invisible. Gray tried several more restaurants, but the result was always the same. The staff either ignored him or dismissed him with a cold, hard stare. Gray felt like he was trapped in a nightmare, a world where he didn't belong. As he walked down the streets, Gray couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between himself and the people around him. He saw the well-dressed men and women rushing by, their faces hidden beneath thick scarves and hats. They seemed oblivious to the suffering of the people around them, lost in their own worlds of luxury and privilege. Gray felt a sense of bitterness rising within him. He wondered why he had been dealt such a cruel hand, why he had to suffer while others lived in comfort and abundance. He couldn't help but feel angry at the injustice of it all. But despite his anger and frustration, Gray refused to give up. He knew that he had to keep searching for food and shelter if he wanted to survive. He trudged through the snow, his feet aching and his body numb with cold. Gray tried to push away the bitterness he felt as he was turned away from yet another restaurant. He knew that he couldn't give up, that he had to keep searching for someone who would show him kindness. But as he walked down the street, he couldn't help but feel like he was invisible. People rushed past him, not even sparing him a glance. Gray felt like he was a burden, an inconvenience to the people around him. He wondered why people treated him with such indifference. He had once been a successful businessman, with a comfortable life and everything he needed. But when he lost everything, he found himself at the mercy of a society that didn't care about people like him. The more he was rejected, the more Gray began to feel like he didn't belong in this world. He wondered if anyone would ever show him some kindness, if anyone would ever care. As he walked down the street, Gray saw a young couple walking towards him. They were holding hands, laughing and chatting, seemingly without a care in the world. Gray mustered up the courage to approach them and ask for help. But as soon as they saw him, their smiles disappeared, replaced by a look of disgust. "Get away from us, you filthy beggar," the man spat out, pulling his girlfriend closer to him. Gray felt a wave of shame wash over him. He didn't know why people treated him with such cruelty, why they assumed that he was lazy or unworthy just because he was homeless. But despite the rejection and discrimination he faced, Gray refused to give up. He knew that he had to keep fighting, that he had to find someone who would show him some kindness. As Gray trudged through the snow, he saw a small cafe with a warm, inviting atmosphere. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should even bother trying to get help. But something in him told him to try one more time. He approached the cafe and saw a woman inside, wiping down the counters. She looked up and saw him standing there, and Gray braced himself for another rejection. But to his surprise, the woman smiled at him and asked if she could help him. Gray was taken aback by her kindness. He explained his situation, and the woman listened with empathy and understanding. She offered him a hot meal and a place to stay for the night. Gray was overwhelmed with gratitude. He couldn't believe that someone had finally shown him some kindness. As he ate his meal, he felt a glimmer of hope in his heart. The woman introduced herself as Grace, the manager of the cafe. Gray learned that she was known in the community for her generosity and kindness. She often gave free meals to the homeless and donated to local shelters. Gray couldn't believe that someone like Grace existed in a world where so many people seemed indifferent to the suffering of others. He felt like he had found a guardian angel, someone who could help him get back on his feet. The next morning, Grace offered Gray a job at the cafe. He was hesitant at first, but Grace assured him that she believed in him and that he deserved a second chance. Gray started working at the cafe, washing dishes and cleaning tables. He quickly discovered that he had a talent for cooking. He loved the feeling of creating something delicious and watching people enjoy it. With Grace's help, Gray found a small apartment to live in. He didn't have much, but he was grateful for a warm bed and a roof over his head. He felt like he had been given a new lease on life. Gray couldn't believe how much his life had changed in such a short amount of time. He had gone from being homeless and hungry to having a job and a place to live. He felt like he had a purpose again. But despite all the good that had happened to him, Gray still struggled with trust. He had been rejected and mistreated so many times that he found it hard to believe that people could be kind without any ulterior motives. Grace noticed Gray's hesitation and knew that he needed time to heal. She never pressured him to talk about his past or his feelings. Instead, she gave him space and showed him kindness in small ways. One day, Grace asked Gray if he wanted to help her deliver some food to a local shelter. Gray was hesitant at first, but he decided to give it a try. As they walked to the shelter, Gray couldn't help but feel a sense of already seen. He had been on the receiving end of this kindness so many times before, and now he was in a position to give back. They arrived at the shelter, and Gray saw the people inside, huddled together for warmth. He recognized the looks of despair and hopelessness in their eyes, and he knew how they felt. But this time, he was on the other side of the equation. He was the one bringing hope and kindness, not the one begging for it. Gray felt a sense of purpose wash over him. He realized that he had been given a second chance not just for himself, but also to help others. He knew that he had to use his experiences to make a difference in the world. As they left the shelter, Gray turned to Grace and thanked her for everything she had done for him. He realized that he had found someone he could trust, someone who had shown him the power of kindness and compassion. Gray continued to work at the cafe, learning more about cooking and gaining confidence in himself. He started to make friends with the regular customers, who were impressed by his culinary skills and his positive attitude. But Gray knew that not everyone would be as accepting of him. He had encountered too much rejection and discrimination to let his guard down completely. One day, a group of well-dressed women came into the cafe. They looked at Gray with disdain, making snide comments about his appearance and his background. Gray felt a wave of shame wash over him, and he wished he could disappear. But Grace was not about to let them get away with their prejudice. She calmly approached the group and told them that they were not welcome in the cafe if they couldn't treat everyone with respect. The women were taken aback, not used to being confronted like this. Grace stood her ground, refusing to let their narrow-mindedness and prejudice go unchecked. Gray felt a sense of pride and gratitude towards Grace. He realized that he had found someone who not only believed in him but also stood up for him in the face of discrimination. As the women left, Gray turned to Grace and thanked her for her support. He knew that it wasn't easy to confront people like that, but he also knew that it was necessary. Gray realized that he had a voice, and that he could use it to speak up against injustice and discrimination. He felt like he was part of something bigger than himself, a movement towards kindness and empathy. Gray had come a long way since he first walked into the cafe, hungry and desperate for help. He had found a job, a place to live, and most importantly, a sense of purpose. But Gray knew that his journey was far from over. He still saw the suffering of homeless people every day, and he knew that there was much more he could do to help. One day, Gray approached Grace with an idea. He wanted to start a program to help homeless people find jobs and housing, using his own experiences as a guide. Grace was impressed by Gray's initiative and agreed to help him. They started reaching out to local businesses, asking if they would be willing to give homeless people a second chance. To their surprise, many businesses were receptive to the idea. They saw the potential in people like Gray, who had fallen on hard times but still had skills and talents to offer. Gray started mentoring other homeless people, showing them how to cook and clean and providing them with job referrals. He saw the hope and gratitude in their eyes, and he knew that he was making a difference. As the program grew, Gray realized that he had found his true calling. He had gone from a man who had lost everything to someone who was helping others find a new beginning. Gray knew that he still faced challenges, that there would be people who would reject him and try to bring him down. But he also knew that he had the power to overcome those obstacles, to stand up for what he believed in and to help others in need. As Gray looked back on his journey, he realized that it had been a difficult one, but also one filled with hope and redemption. He had learned that it was never too late to start again, to find kindness and compassion in a world that sometimes seemed indifferent. Gray sat at a table in the cafe, sipping a cup of coffee and watching the people around him. He saw the regular customers, the ones who had welcomed him with open arms and had shown him kindness when he needed it the most. He also saw the new customers, the ones who looked at him with suspicion and prejudice. But Gray no longer felt ashamed or embarrassed by their judgment. He knew that he had found a place where he belonged, where he was valued for who he was. As he sat there, Gray realized how much he had learned about the power of kindness. He had seen firsthand how a small act of kindness could change someone's life, how it could restore hope and dignity to those who had lost it. He thought about all the people who had helped him along the way, from Grace to the regular customers to the businesses who had given him a second chance. He felt a sense of gratitude that he couldn't put into words. Gray knew that there were still many people out there who were suffering, who were living on the streets and struggling to survive. But he also knew that he had the power to make a difference, to show them that there was still hope in the world. He thought about the program he had started, and how it had helped so many people find jobs and housing. He knew that there was still much more work to be done, but he also knew that he was up for the challenge. Gray realized that his own journey had been one of redemption and second chances. He had gone from a successful businessman to a homeless beggar, and then to someone who was helping others in need. He knew that his story was just one of many, but he hoped that it could inspire others to believe in the power of kindness and compassion. He knew that if he could make a difference, anyone could. As Gray got up from his table and left the cafe, he felt a sense of purpose and hope. He knew that he had found his place in the world, a place where he could make a difference and help others in need.